Hey, welcome to Everyday Economics, a podcast that helps you learn about the economic world happening around you every day. I'm your host, Chris Krug, president of the 501c3 nonprofit Franklin News Foundation. Everyday Economics is a production of America's Talking Network. You can check out all of our great podcasts at americastalking.com. We are recording this episode on Monday, April 3rd, and joining me as always, Chipper, Dr. Orphe Divounguy, PhD economist. Dr. O. Let's get right into what we're going to chat about. We have some economic stuff from the end of last week that we need to clean up and maybe make a little bit of sense of. The Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index, excluding food and excluding energy, increased 0.3% for the month. I'm taking this straight off of the CNBC story. That's reported by the Commerce Department. That figure was below the 0.4% Dow Jones estimate and lower than the 0.5% January increase. So, PCE and inflation are running in interesting directions. Make sense of this for us.
We talked about this on the podcast. We knew this was going to happen. We said it. We called it. Inflation's coming down. And by the way, the current pace of disinflation is roughly in line with the Federal Reserve's projection of core PCE, right? So PCE without the volatile food and energy prices at 3.6% for the year. If all things stays the same, and we continue at this pace, we'll get to 3.6% year over year inflation by the end of the year, but for 2023. But I am not all that optimistic. I usually am, right? I'm usually optimistic when I'm becoming a little bit less optimistic.
What's in the trending that you don't like? You and I talked earlier today. You said you were a little bit uneasy.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people will look at the last 3 months, and the last 3 months include that crazy January with where we said, look, residual seasonality was a problem. And they look at the last 3 months, they say, well, inflation seems to have been accelerating over the last 3 months. Yes, that's true, but that's not what's eating at me. I think what's eating at me is when you add the 60 tornadoes and mass destruction in 10 states in the March. You add the coming summer wildfires and the Atlantic hurricane season that's on the way.
But isn't that factored in?
No, because, it's not like it used to be. Look at 60 tornadoes in 10 states.
It's not wildly uncommon. I mean, it's not completely outside of the pale.
I think it is. Did you see the destruction compared to last year or the year before? The destruction, and especially at this time, those are all supply shocks, man.
That part of it is real. And in the interim, yes.
And then you have the OPEC deciding to cut oil production by 1 million barrels per day. Look, all of these factors will continue. Now, I shouldn't say continue. Will put additional upward pressure on prices to the dismay of central bankers. And I'm not finished. We got the rising, ongoing geopolitical tensions between U.S. and China. We have the missing doctors and nurses that simply aren't returning after COVID. We also have, I was watching the news over the weekend, and we have the FAA saying we have missing air traffic controllers and calling the airlines to reduce the number of flights this summer. We got some serious supply issues that are persisting. And so how do we get inflation back to 2%? Anytime soon. I don't know. I'm starting to worry that there are more and more stagflationary winds in the horizon.
How do we get inflation back to the accepted level of 2%?
I think the Fed has to continue. Sadly, I think the Fed has to continue raising rates, but they raise rates at the risk of crashing the economy and not necessarily seeing prices fall all that much either. And so, you think back to the oil crisis of the 1970s, right? You're in a situation where you're going to have tighter lending conditions that are going to lead to less hiring, more layoffs, push up unemployment. And at the same time, these supply shocks might actually keep inflation somewhat higher than the Fed's 2% target.
What does that look like to the consumer at home? Make sense of that.
Yeah, it means your purchasing power is falling. And you might not get to see it improve very much
in some sectors of the economy.
That's right. But yeah, and I think unfortunately we're not getting back. We're not that soft landing scenario. That the hopes for that soft landing scenario are vanishing they're fading. I don't know. I don't want to call it over, but I am starting to be less and less optimistic about where this is headed. I know for sure the Fed has to continue thinking about inflation and raising interest rates. Maybe less, maybe look and see what's happening. But unfortunately, it seems like a hard landing is in the cards. And that's when I see this, it's not coming down fast enough. And there are too many factors that are just jumping at the Fed, punching the Fed right in the nose.
Let's call it to an end for now, right there. As always, thanks, Dr. O. For Orphe Divounguy, this has been Chris Krug. Subscribe to Everyday Economics at americastalking.com.